Heroes, rise up and stand together. Join into the leagues of those who look to protect the innocent here in Metroville. This week on Schedule for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I talk with Tyler about his superhero tabletop role-playing game, Metroville. Build your dream comic book characters in this easy to pick up and easier to play game where you and your friends are the heroes of your own story. We talk about superhero media, numbers, and character-driven stories. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I am incredibly excited to be joined by another wonderful tabletop creator for a very interesting, very unique superhero tabletop role-playing game called Metroville. Tyler, thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thanks for having me.
We're recording this in about mid-September, I'd say. And you got in contact with me about a month ago, and I've been really excited to talk about this because we've only had one other superhero tabletop role-playing game come on, and there's been a couple of announcements. I mean, MCU's just as big as ever, and I'm really excited to talk about your take on the superhero genre.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, I've seen probably, I don't want to say every because I probably have missed some, but close to every MCU piece of content that's come out in the last 10 or 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm a big superhero junkie. I haven't seen all of the behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the making of Hawkeye, I didn't get a chance to see that, but the mainstream stuff I have, and if it's on Disney Plus, I probably watched it.
See, that's so exciting to me because I really like comics. I am so far behind on MCU. I'm talking, I still haven't watched Infinity Wars or Endgame, whichever one came first. I think the most recent film I watched was the second Spider-Man film, Far From Home, I think it's called. And that was the last one I saw. Yeah. That was the last one I saw, so that had to have been... it was pre-pandemic, definitely.
Yeah, it was. That was one with Mysterio, right?
Yeah.
2019.
Okay, so maybe not as far back as I thought.
Continuing this trend of modern Spider-Man villains just being Iron Man villains that Spider-Man has to deal with.
But we're not here to talk about Marvel. We're here to talk about you and Metroville. So, Tyler, before we really hop into it, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, by day, I'm a teacher in Ontario, Canada. I teach English, math, and history. And by night, I am typically a GM in my games. Right now, I'm GMing a game of Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's called Avatar Legends, I think is what the new system's called.
Yeah.
So I'm GMing a game of that, as well as a game of Pathfinder 2nd edition. And I'm the creator of Metroville.
Which we are going to be talking about a
Yeah.
lot more in just a moment. So, obviously, between the teaching background and some of the subjects that you teach and the game mastering, you seem to be somebody who's really drawn to stories. What kind of stories really get your mind going, Tyler?
Honestly, for me, it's the character stories, right? If you give me a big plot and the end of the world is happening and whatever, it can get kind of, I don't want to say stale, but it the stakes are only so big as the characters for me, which actually was a pretty driving force behind how Metroville was designed.
Yeah.
With all of the ability to create the most customizable character that I could think of, the ability to do. Because when I was I've been playing role-playing games for not that long, actually, maybe only the last 3-4 years.
Okay.
And the biggest thing that frustrated me was that when I made my characters, or when my players made their characters, there were some things about their characters that we all thought were really important, but we couldn't figure out how to represent within certain rule systems.
Yeah.
Whether that be, my character has really, they have fur, and it's just, why does that not make a difference between your character that doesn't have fur and does have fur? And so, that really was a big reason why Metroville has such a robust trait system.
Yeah.
And of course, all of the traits have numerical values because I am a math nerd. And it was fun for me to sort of try and make the balancing of different traits interesting, mechanically speaking.
I think a good 2/3 of this book is like, hey, here's how to build characters, or like powers and customization, and there's like this huge emphasis, and it really comes through that you're trying to tell stories about not just superheroes, but people with superpowers, which I think is like, there's like a definite difference there, to me at least, and like how you can approach them. You've designed Metroville to be able to do both in really interesting ways.
Yeah, and I don't think Metroville is 100% unique in that aspect. There's even within the superhero genre, I think it's called Masks, where you're all teenage superheroes. And so I looked at that and I got some inspiration from there in terms of like what ways I can make character more at the forefront of an RPG. But I felt that game was a little bit limiting in terms of like what kinds of stories you could tell, right? It really was just teen superhero drama, where I wanted Metroville to be a little bit more freeform. That is where all of the customization options are come into play, right? Like, I think you mentioned most of the 2/3 of the rulebook is just character options, and that's 100% true, because we have over 30 different powers in the book, some of which actually came from our Kickstarter backers, which is really cool. One of the tiers was to work with me and create a power, and I had a couple of people back at that tier, and they came up with some pretty cool stuff too that wasn't already in the book, actually. So that was really fun.
That's super fun. But we've been kind of dancing around it. What is Metroville?
That is the question, isn't it? Metroville is the tagline is, it's a superpowered role-playing game. Because for me, Metroville is about playing characters with superpowers, like you said. It's about being a superpowered person, so that doesn't mean I have like a couple of actions that I can do, right? If I'm Magneto, I'm not like, oh man, I can only lift up that object because it's of this size and this like distance away from me and stuff like that. The game is so flexible and you can be so creative. So if I had to summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences, I would probably say something like Metroville is a superhero role-playing game where you can create any character you want, play them any way you want, and creativity is and should be rewarded at the table.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the ways that Metroville sets up its action economy, its combat system, and its reactions and actions and superpowers, it really does give you that freeform flexibility and thinking.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad that comes across, because that is 100% what the goal was. We wanted to make it so that basically you could be the superhero that you see on TV or in the comics.
Mm-hmm. Something that's also really appreciated about this game is, while there is a lot of depth to character creation, it's also really easy to get into Metroville. Like, it's a really simple system in like a very positive way. So do you mind talking a little bit about how the dice system came up and why specifically you went with the die pool system instead of something like the D20 system?
Sure. So, like a lot of us, I'm sure, my first role-playing game was Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
And the D20 frustrated me a lot, in the sense that, if I'm playing, I don't know, let's say I'm playing a barbarian with 18 strength, and there's a wiry little rogue over there with 12 strength. I have a 15% higher chance to do a strength thing than they do. Not taking into account like proficiencies and whatever. We're not going to get too detailed into that right now. But the idea that like the percentages are so close, and it just felt like my character wasn't that unique. Which again, it all comes back to character for me. The die pool system allowed me to do a lot of different things. First of all, it allowed me to make it so that your actions were consistent, just with the way that, like the law of large numbers, right? So the more dice you roll, the closer you're going to get to average every time. So in Metroville, you're going to probably start out the game, if you build your character in like at least a somewhat logical way, you're going to get 4 to 6 dice for your major power rolls at the start of the game. And so, with average successes, you're probably going to get between 2 and 3 every roll. And so you can kind of like count on that, right? Whereas with the D20, you can't. You're like it's the same odds to roll any number. So having that balance, having that middle, like the bell curve, was really important to me, because superheroes, to me, they don't often fuck up on the little stuff.
No.
Right? Like, you never see Spider-Man fail to hit the thing with his web. Right? Sometimes he'll run out of webs, and that's a completely different thing. But he'll never miss the building.
Yeah, he's
right. So it makes it so that it's almost impossible to mess up the little things. The things that you can do consistently, and it makes those highs even higher, right? Because if you're rolling 5 dice and you need a 4 or 5, that's the odds are not in your favor. But when you get that it's pretty hype.
So, for those who may not know, how exactly does Metroville's dice pool system work?
Right. Yeah. So it functions basically like, so you have a stat, right? So let's say you have a body. Your stat is body, and you'll have a power which will use that stat and add a modifier to it. So super strength is a really obvious one. Super strength adds to body. So let's say you have a super strength modifier of 2 and a body of 3. You're going to have 5 dice in your pool that you're going to roll. And so when you roll those 5 dice, you're basically looking for 4 and above. So anything 4 and above is considered a success, and then you just count the number of successes.
Like I said, it's super easy for a beginner player to pick up and understand that. Like, you're looking for 4, 5, 6.
Exactly.
And the more that you're rolling, the better your likelihood of getting one of those numbers.
Exactly, and that's the other thing about Metroville is like theoretically you could calculate the odds of every single die roll that you're going to make, but you don't really need to have like a rough idea of I'm rolling 4 dice, I need 3 successes. That's not too hard, not too easy. Or I'm rolling 7 dice, I need 1 success. I'm probably gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly. And with the way that the dice pools are built, actually, let's talk about that. How do you build your dice pool in this game? Because we know that you have your major stat, but what other factors may give or hinder your pool?
So there's 3 so on top of the base stat, there's 3 different major ways you can alter your pool. Your power, first of all. So like I said, super strength has a modifier. It'll add to your pool. There's also talents. Talents are anything from riding a motorcycle to understanding the constellations. And that'll also add to your pool. Obviously, those probably won't add to your body pool, but they would help in other circumstances. And then finally, there's traits. Traits we briefly brought those up earlier. These are the things that make your character unique. And traits come in both positive and negative, and they can add to your rolls or subtract from your rolls, right? So if one of your traits is athletic, you're going to add to your body rolls. If one of your traits is trying to think of negative trait now, if one of your traits is gullible, that's going to subtract from your rolls, right? And so those are the 3 things essentially on top of the main stat. You've got your powers, you got your talents, and you got your traits.
And those all influence the dice pool system.
Exactly.
One of my favorite things, especially about the talents system, is how those can naturally, through play and through storytelling, develop, 100%. And you can get those. I love that. Like, anytime a game builds in, like, oh, you're slowly learning something, you're becoming talented in it, I love that. I think it's such good design to reward people for basically role-playing something and getting better at it.
Yeah. Metroville is all about the fiction saying when you get better at something. I was actually really inspired by video game RPGs here. So things like Skyrim, Oblivion, where if you are using your one-handed sword, you're going to get better at one-handed swords. It's a similar thing here. If you get better with your super strength superpower, you're going to get better at using your super strength superpower. Or talents, same thing.
Yeah. You brought up kind of like advancing there and narrative advancement. I think that Metroville has one of the most rewarding and unique ways of quote unquote leveling up. Can you talk a little bit about what the powering up process looks like in this game?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty sure it is. The section is called powering up in the rulebook, so that's perfect. So basically, how it works is you will have your die pool that you've created up before you make your roll, and the GM will usually, I think we call it a narrator in Metroville. Anyway, so the narrator will tell you what the the success, how many successes you need to roll in order for a moderate success to happen. We'll talk about levels of success later, I'm sure. But suffice to say, moderate success means you succeed with some complications. Or at least you get most of what you want. And so in order to succeed with a moderate success, you'll have a number for that. Let's say you have a die pool of 6, and your moderate success difficulty is 4, right? So you need 4 successes in order to get a moderate success. That would be what we call a heroic task. So there's 2 different kinds of tasks. The first being heroic, where if you get if your roll is half of your die pool, like if the success difficulty is half of your die pool or greater, we call that a heroic task. And so basically the purpose of this was to prevent characters and players from essentially doing push-ups in the background and leveling up. And one of the people who was playtesting this game, he is what you might call a power gamer.
Oh. Yes, I've run into a number of these.
and I actually think that's a good thing when you're running a playtest, because he showed me where all of the things can get a little crazy. And so that's why this system is in place with the 50% or greater. And so that's what heroic tasks are. And mythic tasks. These tasks are anything that is where the difficulty is equal to or greater than your die pool total. Or sorry, not equal to or 1 less than your die pool total. And you have to succeed on these things, right? So if you have a 6 die pool system, or 6 die pool, and your moderate success difficulty is a 5 or a 6, that's a mythic. Okay, and so in order to get a power point or an advancement point, basically you need to get a certain number of heroic tasks and mythic tasks. I say a certain number because the number changes based on a lot of different aspects, including what your current modifiers at, some traits that you have. There are some traits that'll make it easier or harder for you to gain advancement points. It also will change based on your origin as well. So that's basically how leveling up works. You gotta actually do things that are somewhat difficult.
You had briefly mentioned moderate successes there. Do you want to bring up the success system in this game?
Yeah. So basically there's failures or misses, and then there's moderate successes, and then there's flawless successes. The book will always describe the difficulty as a moderate success difficulty, and that's because the flawless success difficulty is always a moderate success plus 2. So if the moderate success is 4, the flawless is 6, etc., etc. And so basically a failure or a miss is what it sounds like. You aren't able to accomplish the action in the way that you want to. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the player fails completely and miserably. It could mean that some unforeseen circumstances show up. This is this is where some GMing improv will help out a little bit. It's a similar system to a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, right? Where there's no like, this is exactly what happens when this rolls or when this rolls or when this rolls, right? Because it's more narrative focused. And then a moderate success is, like I said earlier, if you are able to you're able to do the thing, but not perfectly, right? So you try and throw the boulder, but maybe the boulder splits in half halfway through the air, and the other half goes somewhere you weren't hoping it would go. Or maybe the boulder doesn't quite make it to where you want to, or maybe it goes further than you want it to, and it, shenanigans ensue. And then, of course, a flawless success means that, well, you did it flawlessly, right? Exactly what you wanted to happen happens, and you save the day, basically.
You had mentioned Powered by the Apocalypse there, so you have your miss, which is everything goes south, things go poorly. Then there's your mixed success, which is your moderate success, which is things are, you get what you want, but there's some side effects. And then your flawless success, which is you get exactly what you're looking for. Everything turned out dandy. And I think that's like my favorite way to handle these narrative systems, because it builds drama
100%.
into your game. And that can be really hard for people when they're first starting out, switching over to like a more narrative game.
Mm-hmm.
I think I love seeing people switch over from like 5e to a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and then just like them grasping that like not hard failing sort of thing.
Yeah.
I love seeing it happen. You had just mentioned a moment ago Origins, and we actually have gone somehow throughout this entire conversation so far without talking about character creation, which blows my mind. So let's go a little bit through character creation and how you build up these characters and their stories and their major and minor abilities.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have kind of danced around it quite a bit, but to really dig in, I'm not going to go into too many numbers here because it's a little easier.
There's a lot.
And it's easier to go into the numbers if you are actually looking at the book. So we'll do broad strokes. So broad strokes, step 0 for me is come up with a character theme. It's really hard in a system like this to sort of wing it, at least for me. If I don't know what, at least like have a rough idea of what I want, like it's too freeform, I think, for that to happen, which is an advantage, but also it can be seen as a disadvantage for some people that want to have a character in 30 seconds. Metroville is not a game where that can happen. I would say you could do it if you're experienced with the system. You could probably do it in 5 or 10 minutes, but it's not one of those like OSR games where you can roll on a couple of tables and then you have a character for the night.
Yeah.
So anyways, so you start with your character theme. This can be super general. It could be, I want them to be like really, really good at parkour, or I want them to be like an acrobat, or I want them to be a miner or a dungeon delver, or I want them to be a airplane pilot. It could be very general like that, or it could be really specific. You could be trying to emulate a character that already exists. You could be like, I want to make Batman. I want to make Spider-Man, or you could have your own, I want to make this character that I've been thinking of for the last 5 years. And so that's where the character themes sort of come in, and they really help mold where the rest of this goes, because step 2, or I guess step 1, is to come up with your origin. At this point, the origins include everything from like genetic manipulated people, so like experiments, accidents, like your Hulks, your Spider-Mans, or people who are genetically changed from birth, so you're mutants, right? Like your Wolverines and your X-Men's, right? It includes your high-tech heroes, so like your Iron Mans, things like that. You've got aliens, you've got magic. I've even included a type for training, so your classic highly trained vigilantes, so your Batmans, your that kind of character. Yeah. And so we've got all those different options, and those are your origins. Those, for the most part, will dictate a couple of starting things. So if you're an alien, you will have a trait that it says that you're not very good at interacting with people because maybe you don't know them very well, or you have a hard time understanding their society, or things like that. If you're a tech hero, it's going to give you a suit of armor at the start, or something, right? Some sort of tech to start the game with. And for the most part, it's really just the starting stuff. Then, with the exception that magic will let you get access to certain powers, and training will let you get access to certain powers, because they're kind of niche, those two types of origins. And then, so once you've selected your origin, you're then gonna make your you're actually gonna up your stats and change your stats. And so you get some points to put into stats. This includes your body, your agility, your mind, your willpower, and your charisma, and your stamina points. So stamina, kind of like health. And so these stats will usually be dictated by what kind of powers you're looking at, or you can base your powers off of what stats you want. The order there is a little bit fluid. So then once you pick your stats, you're going to go into the list of 30 plus powers that all have 1 to 2 pages description on them in the book. Each of them comes with a cool illustration to kind of show the power in action in a fun way. The powers also come with the descriptions, and the powers are basically like, here's some examples of things that we did during our playtest, or things that I came up with that they could do. These are not the limits of things they could do. So you've got your powers now, which again are, like I said, somewhat chosen by your origins. Your origins will dictate those. Which ones you can choose, how powerful they are to start, things like that. Then we go into talents. Talents are where you can get even more creative. So everyone gets to choose a couple of talents from the list, and then once you're done those, you actually have to come up with your unique talents. This is the fun part for me. Your unique talents have to be something that is just so whack that it's unlikely to be useful. But the fun part is when it is, it's like your character's the star of that scene, right? Okay. For example, the knowledge of the stars was one that we used in a game once, and they were able to tell their direction based on the stars that were in the sky, and it was great for that character to have that moment, because they were the only one in the game that could have that thing, because it's unique to them. So you got your talents, and then finally your traits. The traits are they're the most mathy part of character creation, because each trait has a point value associated with them, either negative or positive, and your goal is to balance out to 0. Okay, so if you take a +3 trait, you could take a -2 and a -1, 3 -1s, or a -3, or as long as you get it to balance out, it doesn't really matter how many traits you have. And so then you're done your character creation. So, quick summary: origins into into points, like stat points, into powers, into talents, into traits.
It all kinds of builds on each other, and it gives your character a lot of depth. And like, we didn't mention it because like part of the fun of tabletop role-playing games is that like you're writing your character's story as this is happening. Like, the way that I like to think about Metroville is that like issue 1 has already happened.
Yeah.
And now you and your friends are doing your first Avengers-style team-up.
Yeah, exactly. You've had your solo movie. It's time for the team-up movie.
Yeah, this is our Spider-Man Homecoming, basically.
Yeah.
Is what Metroville kind of skips over all the dirty stuff that people kind of have a vague clue about, and it hops right into the meat of who the character is.
Right. Yeah, that's how I would describe it as well. That's perfect.
So, you had mentioned a little while back, though, that this was a Kickstarter game. I just wanted to ask you about your experience with Kickstarter and some of the more interesting powers that were created because of that.
Sure, yeah. So Kickstarter was a process. As I said before, I'm a teacher. Before I was a teacher, I was a camp counselor, and that's pretty much the only jobs. I mean, I've been a tutor, so my jobs have been basically education focused and like not even close to marketing. And so like my education in terms of like I have an English and history and math background, which sounds like a weird combination, but I think that the writing of like the copy was not terrible, but of course there was a lot of editing that still went into it. I have a lot of great friends who helped me out doing that. We spent a lot of hours on the couch and over Discord going over all of the all of the sentence things and all of the there should be a period here, why is that thing covering over there, there should be that picture is too big, whatever, all of the stuff that goes along with creating any kind of marketing stuff, because it was the first time I had ever done anything like this, so it was a ride for sure. And honestly, being honest, I didn't expect. I mean, I wouldn't have been too disappointed if it didn't get backed, if it didn't get fully funded, because I knew it was my first attempt. I knew the success rate, going in, and so I was kind of floored when in like 10 or 11 days we were fully backed. So that was a great experience with interacting with the community, and going on shows like this have been a lot of fun. Getting to talk about Metroville and other games, it's been really fun. So yeah, Kickstarter in general, I think it was a good experience. Would I do it again? Maybe not for a while. But it's a lot of work, and anyone who wants to do a Kickstarter should know that it is a lot of work if you want to make it successful, not just during the campaign, but especially before the campaign. In terms of the powers that came out of it, because of some of our very generous backers who wanted to make the game partly their own too. So the first one was a power called Invention. And that one, basically they wanted to be able to make tools on the fly. So they want to basically be like a super powered MacGyver, which I found really cool. So we tinkered and toyed with that, and we came up with something that I think is really cool and that they were happy with. So yeah, basically you can make different tools of different complexity levels, and they last different amounts of time based on the complexity of the tool. And so that ended up being really cool. And the second one was a monstrous transformation is what the power ended up being called, which we have a shapeshift power already, so I was a little bit hesitant going into this one, but it ended up working out really cool because it was the first power that I created that had some sort of detriment attached to it. So there are a lot of superheroes that exist, what's the guy who can only talk really loud?
Black Bolt?
Black Bolt, yes. So there are characters like him out there that, their powers are kind of a curse as well as a benefit.
Yeah.
And so this was kind of like that. So with this power, you could turn into like a monstrous form. So this means like, your giant lizards, your vampires, your werewolves, things like that. But of course, with that, you're a monster. And so there's this level of loss of control that comes in. There's this limitation on when it can happen based on like what kind of creature you're turning into. And so that was a really cool one to sort of figure out where all the knobs and levers are in terms of balancing it. Because it was different from any of the other ones that I had made before.
It's interesting, too, because these powers all act on roughly the same scale, which is really difficult to balance. So to hear about that makes it really interesting, like the shape-shifting power versus like telekinesis, for instance, like making sure that those two things feel distinct, both powerful and roughly on the same level, is a huge amount of work.
Oh yeah. And it was a lot of math that I ended up doing. So player facing, you won't see any of the equations. But trust me, they were there. And that was a lot of it. But at a certain point with a narrative game like this, where there's so much freeform options, I had to just throw my hands up and say some of these may not be equal in all circumstances.
Yeah.
Right? Your ability to be clairvoyant is not going to help you in the same circumstances as being able to to run super fast. Right? There's some powers that are more niche, but those niche ones are really good at doing what they do. It's not all math. Some of it is more of an art than a science in some ways, but but I tried to use a little bit of math where I could.
We've talked a lot about numbers too, and like I just want the audience to know out there that this game is like it's basically as crunchy as you want it to be, but it's not that crunchy. Like you're basically adding up your dice pool, you're figuring out what goes into it, you roll your dice, and then you look for the fours and ups. Like that's what you're doing. So like it's a really well balanced system. And I just want to throw that out there. Because like I said, well, yeah, you deserve to hear it. We've talked a lot about the math and stuff like that, but a player is not going to see that.
Yeah.
Like that is not something that they have to worry too much about.
Yeah, for sure. That was, in the early days of it, it was a little more player facing, and I got some feedback that might not be what a lot of people want to do, math at the table. Shocker. So it definitely didn't make it to the final cut along the map.
No, that's totally fair. That stuff can be, it's good, I should say, because a lot of that stuff can be off-putting or difficult for a wider audience to kind of sit down and enjoy.
Yeah, the hardest math I would say is probably during the character creation. You have to add some integers, but calculators exist. And you only have to do that one time, and it's not during play,
So, Tyler, we're actually almost 50 minutes into this here.
Yeah.
And I got 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
And they're asked at the end of every episode. So, my first question for you, what advice can you give to somebody looking to make their own game, but they don't know where to start?
Okay. First, I would say figure out if the game that you want to make already exists. Because that was a lot of what I was trying to do. I was trying to figure out if the game that I wanted to play already existed, because it's a lot of work to make your own game.
Yeah.
And so if it already exists, that's great, and you kind of avoided all the hassle. But if the game that you want that will scratch that itch does not exist, I would say play a lot of other games. So if you look at Metroville rules and you've played a lot of other role-playing games, you'll notice that there's pieces of Masks. You'll notice that there's pieces of Powered by the Apocalypse in there. Not necessarily that game, but like that idea of the system. You'll notice that there's pieces of the Burning Wheel in there. Look for inspiration in places that you might not first expect it to be. And finally, be open to feedback. Metroville is very, very, very different than what I initially wrote down on paper. After going through lots of different discussions and playtests and just thinking about it, and it's not the same, because what you think about in your head might not translate well to a larger group experience. And just be open to feedback from your players, from other DMs, and take that advice. And you don't necessarily have to make the changes. If they're saying this part of the game was slow, maybe the goal for it was to be slow, but listen to it at least.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. That's honestly one of the biggest lessons you can learn when you're starting out, is to take feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I even think back to when I started Schedule for Launch, and taking feedback is tough.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to accept feedback is really hard.
Yeah, it is. There's no magic trick to being good at it either.
No.
It's just
you just gotta get used to it.
Yeah. 100%.
Final question of the night, though.
All right, I'm ready.
Where can people find out more about Metroville and you?
Okay. So I am Metroville/me are on Twitter at Metroville RPG. We're on Instagram at Metroville RPG. We're on Drive-Thru RPG. If you search for Metroville, we have a Discord server, and I'm pretty active in the Discord server. If anyone joins in, asks any questions or wants to know anything, I can be reached. Twitter and Discord are the main ones.
Perfect. And then where can people pick up Metroville?
You can find Metroville at Drive-Thru RPG and on itch.io.
as always, audience, those links are going to be down in the description below. Go check out Metroville, especially if you're into the superhero genre. We barely got to touch the surface on some like the really cool stuff that you can do in this game, but like, it's worth it. Like, go take a look at this game. It's a lot of fun, and it'll be intimidating the first time you look at it for about 2 minutes. And then you hop into it, and it's a lot of fun to build a character. I think I've done 1 or 2 characters just to kind of get a feel for it. And I think that this system has like a lot of potential, and a lot of people will really like it. Especially if you didn't care for multiverse role-playing game by Marvel. Definitely look at this one. If you didn't like that one, definitely look at this one. Tyler, thank you so much for joining me on the show this week.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It was so much fun to learn about this game. And audience, thank you for joining us and listening. Tyler and Metroville have already launched, and you can go pick it up right now. We're going to talk to you real soon, though. So take care of yourselves. Have a good night. I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Thank you so much to Tyler for joining us on the show this week. Metroville has one of the best character builders I have had the chance to look at, and it gives you so much freedom when building out your superhero fantasies. Metroville's already out, so you can go pick it up at one of the links below and get started playing this amazing tabletop role-playing game with your friends today. And I just want to say thank you everyone for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it and want to show your support, why not leave a review on one of your podcatchers like Spotify or Apple Podcast? It really does help the podcast get spotted and helps more people find us and get me looking at more amazing projects out there. There probably won't be a proper episode out next week, so I'm going to give myself a week off just to get caught up on some other stuff. And I don't know if you can hear, but my throat's fading a little bit, and I don't want to lose my voice. If I can get the next project I'm working on figured out, though, maybe I'll give you a sneak peek. I'm not sure yet. Until then, though, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!